Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today things are going to get a little, interesting. We're going to be looking at a blog post called "So You're Waiting for the End" by Jamin Bradley.
Oh, yeah, I know Bradley.
Yeah, now he's kind of all over the place. Pastor, theologian, musician, even an exorcist. But he's got some thought-provoking stuff to say about, how people always seem to get those end times predictions wrong.
Yeah, it's like clockwork. Every few years, someone pops up claiming they have the inside scoop on the apocalypse.
Right. And Bradley points out that, their track record is less than impressive, 100% failure rate so far.
And yet we're still so drawn to it.
Yeah, and he uses this really interesting example.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Harold Camping back in 2011?
Oh, yeah, the guy who predicted the world was going to end, like, twice in 1 year.
That's the one. People were selling their houses, giving away all their money, even committing suicide over it.
It's wild how these predictions can have such a real impact on people's lives.
And, it makes you wonder, what is it about the end of the world that fascinates us so much, right?
Right. Maybe it's the mystery of it all. Or maybe, deep down, we all secretly crave a little bit of cosmic drama.
Yeah, it's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. You know it's going to be bad, but you just can't look away.
Exactly. So, what does Bradley say about all these failed predictions?
Well, he thinks a lot of it boils down to how people interpret the Book of Revelation.
Ah, Revelation, the book that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories.
Pretty much. But Bradley says we can't just take all that imagery literally. It was written for a specific audience at a specific time.
That's like trying to understand Shakespeare without knowing anything about Elizabethan England. You're bound to miss some things.
Exactly. And Bradley reminds us that even Jesus himself said only God knows the exact hour and day.
Yeah, if Jesus is saying, even I don't know, that seems like a pretty good indication that maybe, just maybe, we should stop trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah. Right. And I find it really interesting how the Bible often describes the end as this surprise event, like a thief in the night.
Instead of, like, some meticulously planned event on God's Google Calendar.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's God waiting for then, if not for us to crack the code of Revelation?
So if we're not supposed to be setting our watches by revelation, then what's the holdup? What's God waiting for?
Well, Bradley lays out a couple of really interesting factors that might be influencing the end times timeline.
Oh, okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me.
The first one is salvation.
Salvation. Interesting. I'll admit, that's not the first thing that pops into my head when I think about the apocalypse.
We usually picture fire and brimstone, not warm, fuzzy feeling.
Exactly.
But Bradley argues that God, in his infinite love for humanity, wants to give everyone a chance at salvation.
Okay, so like a universal redemption arc before the final curtain call.
Precisely. He wants every soul to have the opportunity to know him, to choose him, before that final judgment.
Wow, it makes you think about all those who haven't heard the message yet, for whatever reason.
Exactly. And that leads us to the second factor Bradley highlights. Justice.
Okay, justice. So, less about saving souls and more about settling scores.
Well, it's more nuanced than that. Bradley suggests that God's love also compels him to respond to the suffering of his followers, to right the wrongs, to bring about justice in a world that often feels very unjust.
I see. So it's this balancing act between God's incredible patience, wanting every last person to have a shot at redemption, and his heartbreak over the pain inflicted on those who've already chosen to follow him.
You got it. And
Yeah.
it's a fascinating concept, right? Because it makes you wonder, at what point does the weight of all that suffering, all that injustice tip the scales? When does God say, enough is enough?
It's a mind-boggling thing to consider.
Yeah.
And it kind of reframes the whole when is the end question, doesn't it? It's not just about deciphering prophecies. It's about understanding the very nature of God's love and justice.
Exactly. And here's where things get really wild. Based on these two factors, salvation and justice, Bradley suggests that, and I'm just throwing this out there, we might have a few thousand years to go.
A few thousand. Whoa, that's definitely not what I was expecting.
Right. It definitely challenges the whole imminent apocalypse narrative that's so popular these days. But when you think about it from God's perspective, a few thousand years might be like a blink of an eye.
A few thousand years. That really puts a damper on stocking up on canned goods, doesn't it? But seriously, if the world ending isn't exactly a pressing engagement on our calendars, does that change how we should, live?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Bradley doesn't really give us a concrete answer, more like a gentle nudge in a certain direction.
Okay, so less about when the end is coming and more about how we should live our lives until then.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful message for people.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I've definitely fallen into that trap of thinking, oh, the end is near, better shape up and be good. But then the years go by and the world keeps spinning and you kind of fall back into old habits.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, right?
Totally. But Bradley's perspective really makes me think about the legacy I want to leave behind. If we really do have a few thousand years or even just a few decades left on this planet, how do I want to spend that time?
It's a question worth asking ourselves, right? Regardless of our beliefs about the end times, we all have this one precious life.
So true. It's like we don't need a cosmic countdown clock to give our lives meaning.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So I guess the takeaway here is, whether we have a few thousand years or just a few decades, the time to start living with intentionality is now.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, folks, there you have it. Jamin Bradley's unique perspective on the end times. I don't know about you, but it's definitely given me a lot to chew on.
Me too. It'd be
Yeah,
fascinating to get him on the show sometime and really dig into these ideas.
we'll have to see if we can make that happen. But until then, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep those brain gears turning, and we'll catch you next time for another thought-provoking conversation.